So, hello, Marcus. We are recording.
Hello, John. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Just for anybody listening, do I have your permission to post this on YouTube and show people that we had a great, fantastic interview?
Yeah, let's hope we do.
Okay. All right. Well, we can only hope. We can only hope. I did my homework, so I'm ready.
Oh, good. You got some
Some notes.
questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're going to do the introduction, but I wanted to be able to follow along. So read some Ellen Brown essays. I actually got to interview her a couple of years ago, but I've been out of the topic regarding public banking. We just had it happen here in California, but most people don't understand it well. So I know you're an expert on the subject, and I was hoping we could have a discussion about what is public banking? What does that allow you to do? Why is it a good idea? A lot of Californians don't have the basics.
Right. So, the way that I would start out is by letting us consider an interesting question.
Okay.
If you need money to live, and your whole life your life isn't oriented towards money. Your life is supported by money. So if you have money, you've got way more power than if you haven't got money, or if you have a lot of money or you have a little money. So what I'm saying is that money is really important. It's
Right.
kind of like it's what orients your life. Okay, I need to do whatever it is I need to do in order to have the money to live, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I don't like money. I mean, that's a piece of the thing. But I do understand that society is using money as its main organizing principle. So
Right.
whatever I can get money for, I can do, and what I can't get money for, I can't do, unless I can do it as a hobby voluntarily.
Right.
Okay, I just make sure that's clear, right? So the question is, why don't we know who's issuing the money? If it's that important, and everything depends on how we get money,
Yeah.
and what we have to do to have money, and we used to be able to save money. Now we have to invest it and take on a lot of risk because interest rates are so low. It goes on and on and on. You know, why? Why? Why wouldn't we know? Wouldn't all of us know who's issuing the money?
Okay.
That is the question.
Who's issuing
Because,
the money?
yeah, who's issuing the money? Okay, so there are lots of, I mean, you can go to YouTube and put that in, who's issuing the money interviews, and listen to the people who've gone out in the street and asked people what they know about who issues the money. And they say all kinds of things, and they're always wrong. And they say the federal government issues the money, or they say the Federal Reserve banks issue the money, or they say, well, we have a fractional reserve monetary system. Do you understand how that works? No, I don't. There's supposed to be people who do understand it. So rather than doing something that relies on authorities like economists and bankers and what have you, um, I'm going to take you through the actual process of your dealings with banks. Now, remember,
Okay.
what we're trying to get to is what can a public bank do that a private
Right.
bank can't do, right? That's what we're trying to get to. We want to get to a place
Right.
where we actually
Right.
understand what the difference
Right.
is, because it's crucial to understand it. But you have to understand banking first, and you have to understand where money comes from first before that's significant, right? I mean, who cares whether it's a public
Yeah.
bank or a Wall Street bank? It's amounts to the same thing. Okay, maybe a public bank has less interest. Okay, so let's go to the bank because we just got a birthday present in the mail or at the party, and somebody's given us $100 bill. And our thinking is, I think I better deposit the $100 bill. They're hard to spend. I could lose it. You know, it's much too easy. Let me put it in the bank. So you go to the bank and you do what you think of as depositing your money in the bank. Right? That's what you think you're
Okay.
doing. So
Right.
I'll have a bank, you know, it'll go into my account at the bank. It's my money.
Okay.
Okay, so let's actually see what happens. You hand the 100, well, you fill out a deposit slip and you hand, and you don't have to do that anymore, by the way. It's, you know, everything gets more and more convenient so that you have to think about it much less.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
just automatic, you know. Okay, so now I can
Right.
pay with, I just bring my phone close to the reader and I've paid. You know?
Right.
So there's this convenience piece. But anyway, that lets you not think about it, right? Anyway, so you hand the deposit slip and the $100 bill to the bank. And the teller takes the $100 bill and puts it in the cash drawer and puts
Okay.
something in your bank account. I mean, they'll put $100 in your bank account, but is it your $100? So if you actually look at what actually happened right there, you gave the $100 bill, which says on it, this bill, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That's what it says on the note. So it's
Right.
backed by the full faith and credit of the United States of America, the government, etc. It's a legal tender note, lawful money.
Right. Right.
Okay, so you hand it to the bank, and the bank puts the teller puts it in the cash drawer. From the cash drawer, it goes to the into the vault, and from the vault, or actually as soon as you hand it to her, it goes onto the balance sheet of the bank as an asset. In other
Okay.
words, it's not your $100 bill anymore. It's the bank's $100 bill. You cannot tell the bank what to do with that $100 bill. Now, the
Got it.
reason that you think that it's like that is that you can turn around, go to the cash machine and take out a $100 bill or a 20, you know, a bunch of 20s. So the point that I'm trying to make is that $100 bill, when you deposit, do what the bank calls deposit, and I'm doing air quotes on purpose because it's not really
Right.
what you're doing.
Right.
You're not really
Right.
depositing it.
Right. Right.
It's now the bank's. So the bank does the only thing that the bank could do. It puts in your bank account that it owes you $100, right? You
Okay.
handed them $100, so now the bank owes you $100, right?
Okay.
So the $100 bill is an asset of the bank, and the money in your account is, when you opened the account, you signed a whole bunch of documents you didn't read. Did you read the agreement?
No.
Right. It says that that agreement says, in a lot of gobbledygook and sort of hidden, that you are accepting bank credit as money, right? So you make a demand loan to the bank when you deposit a $100 bill, which is legal tender, which says on it, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That's where the whole thing about the government issues the money. Well, yes, the government prints it, but they're not issuing it. Cut for the following reason. You made a demand loan to the bank, and a demand loan means that the bank has to pay you whenever you demand it. How do you know that it's a demand loan? They pay you a little bit of interest. It used to be you could get 2%, right? 1.5%, 2%, maybe 3% on your now account, your negotiable order of withdrawal, right? That's what a
Okay.
now account is. So you used to get a little interest. Oh, well, yeah, sure, I did lend the money to the bank. Yes, that's right. I made a demand loan to the bank. So when you deposited the $100 bill, you also deposited checks. And so
Okay.
you know that the bank is going to do something with those checks, and they don't ever have to take possession. What they're going to do is use the clearing function of the banking system to take the money out of somebody else's account and put it in your account. They're going to follow the instructions on the check.
Got it.
Now, the banking system, this indicates, because it doesn't matter where the bank is, it can be anywhere in the world, actually. They might charge you a fee for, but you know, usually we have free checking. So there isn't even a fee for the bank to do all of this, right? So the banking system as a whole is one system. It's not like there are separate banks. Oh yes, there are separate banks. That's our experience. But really there's one big banking system. And it's
Okay.
all one system. And it's
Okay.
run by the Federal Reserve System.
Okay.
And there are
Okay.
12 Federal Reserve banks that are involved
Districts,
in, right, that are involved in the check clearing.
Yeah, we have
So
one in San Francisco, I believe.
yeah, right. So our entire economy is based on the banks being able to settle the accounts between us, right, with check clearing, totally and completely reliably. So
Okay.
when you want to know where your money is, you reconcile to the bank. Why? Because the bank is totally and utterly reliable. In
Okay.
fact, you don't find the mistake that the bank made. The bank tells you, hey, we made a mistake. Because their accounting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
accounting system is really, really good.
Yeah. Yes, they are very
Okay.
aware, down to the 2 pennies, how much you owe them and what they owe you and where all the cash is at every moment. And yes, it is very reliable. For all my complaints about the banking industry, like collapsing the American and global economy, they're very, very good at keeping track of all the money and where it goes. Absolutely. And they are, and that is
So,
I don't want to slam them. That is a
no, that
useful
is,
function for regular people who don't have a machine gun and a bulletproof vest to be able to store their money and not
yeah.
have to worry about it. That's why we do this, right? So it's not Old West, and it's like I've got my thousands underneath. Because my grandma was Okie and lived through the Depression, and she told me about when they didn't go to banks, what they did, which was jars full of money buried in the backyard. And that was because that was the only way that they could handle cash and exchange it and be safe and secure. So yeah, there absolutely is a vital function being used by banks, being able to provide security for your money that you don't physically have to protect.
Right. That's why I brought the $100 bill to the bank.
Yes, because I don't want that in my pocket.
I don't want it in my
I'm worried
pocket.
about.
I want the 20s, right? So I don't have to
Yeah.
go through the hassle of the card and I don't have to account for it, you know. Even when I'm doing my accounting, I can, you know, in my case, I can spend like $200 a month in cash without bothering to account for it. It's called miscellaneous or whatever. So I don't buy my coffee with, you know, with my credit card or my debit card. I just use cash. And whenever I'm using my debit card, it always gives me the option for cash back. So it's very easy to get cash. I'm at the supermarket, I put my debit card in, and I get to choose how much cash back I want. Yeah, I want 20 bucks back. So that I don't have to buy coffee or coffee and a donut
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Okay,
So that's private banking. For the people listening in later on, we have been talking about private banking, and John Root Jr. has been explaining how private banking works. The bank that you know of, that you go
yeah.
to the store and deal with, most people
Okay,
deal
so
with. We've
so
been describing.
now we're going to go off the deep end.
Okay,
So you need to
I'm ready.
hold on to your seat.
Got it.
Okay, here we go.
Holding on.
What have we okay, so we need the banks and the reliability and the check clearing and settling the
Yeah.
accounts and doing
Yes.
we need all that. And
Very
that's
worthwhile.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, when else do you need the bank?
I think businesses need banking and governments need banking,
And
and
when
that
do
is
you need the
different.
bank? When do you
Me,
need the bank besides the check clearing?
to get a loan.
There you go. I mean, isn't the bank amazingly significant when you want something that you haven't been able to save up for?
Yes, most
Isn't
people have to get a bank loan for their car and their home, which are the top two purchases by volume that any citizen will make. So for most of the things that people put their money into, you go to the bank to get that loan.
That's right. Okay, so what happens when you go to the bank to get the loan? We're going to do this exactly.
Okay.
We're going to do this exactly so that you can totally understand what happens.
Okay, don't break my brain. All right.
I'm not going to break your brain. I'm going to take you through it step by step.
Okay.
So you
All
go to
right.
the bank and you sit down with somebody at the bank, usually a assistant branch manager or a loan officer, right? It depends on what it is that you're borrowing. I mean, you can do this online now, and they've totally obviated the need to know their customers beyond their credit score and their social security number. So you can get a loan online. You can apply for a credit card without any big deal. But let's say that you want to know how much you can borrow to buy a house. And that's the first thing. You go to the mortgage broker or you go to the banker, and they look at your credit score, they look at your history, they look at where it is that you want to buy a house. You haven't necessarily picked the house yet, and they will tell you what you're good for. In fact, they could even give you a commitment letter.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
we will lend you $250,000
Right.
as a mortgage to buy a house that can cost up to, so that there's usually a little equity that you have to provide. So you can't borrow the whole amount unless you're a first-time buyer, and there's programs and guarantees for the bank, etc. So the bank has given you a commitment letter, right? So you know how big of a house you can go for. So
Right. Right.
now, right, it's important because now I'm in a position to go look for a house. I mean, I always know what I'm good for because I'm always up on these things, but most people aren't. So they're very happy to find out what they can handle.
No,
And
and it's the same way with cars. When I
yeah,
went to go buy a car, they told I worked with the dealership, and they go, "We'll go ahead and go through the bank and figure out how much you have to work with." So the bank was already going to tell me, "Mark, you only get to spend so much," and then the car dealers literally go, "That means these cars here." So much the same way. These banks pre-authorize or say, "For your credit, we're willing to loan this much to you. This is how much risk we're willing to take out with you."
right. Okay. So that establishes the role of the bank in our lives and
Okay.
the role of the credit score in our lives, right?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so now you've chosen the house and you've made the offer. The offer has been accepted, and so now you got to do the closing, right? You actually have to go to, well, sometimes you don't even have to go to the bank anymore, but it used to be, and still is to a large extent, that you go to the closing. Now, what happens at the closing? Well, there's the bankers there, and the real estate agents are there, the brokers or the whoever, the lawyer for the bank, the lawyer for you, your lawyer, to make sure that everything happens the way that it needs to happen. So the first thing that you do is you sign a promissory note that you don't read,
Right.
right? You sign a promissory note that you haven't read. The
Right.
lawyer tells you, either the bank's lawyer or your lawyer, or both, tell you this is standard. This is the usual bank agreement. This is what
Yeah.
you have to sign. So why
Yeah.
bother to read it? You don't get to change it. You don't get to question it.
And you don't have an option.
And you don't have any option. It's not a negotiation. This is what you got to sign. And what
Yeah.
you do know is the term and the rate. So you know the principal amount, you know the term, and you know the interest rate. And if you're a little bit enterprising, you'll find the amortization schedule, right? So you'll
Yeah.
see that for the first 15 years of a 30-year mortgage, you're paying mostly interest. And after 15 years, it's sort of even for a while. And then
Right.
gradually, you're paying more principal than interest. Okay, so if you look at the amortization schedule, you say to yourself, I'm buying the bank a house first.
Right.
I'm paying enough money for the bank over the period of the loan. I'm paying enough money to the bank for them to be able to buy a house. And then I get to pay
Right.
for the house that I'm living in.
Right.
What did banks do to be able to get that much from me? And not only that, if I look at history, I'm going to be buying my house with inflated money, and I'm going to be paying interest with current value money.
I don't want to go too off the deep end. But yes, I absolutely hear you. So we have a basic understanding of,
We haven't gotten to the deep dive yet.
okay, all right.
Okay.
Eventually, though, we have to come back around and explain how
I
the
am.
process.
I
Okay.
am.
Okay.
Exactly what we're doing. It's
Okay.
exactly
All right.
what we're doing.
All right.
Okay,
All right.
so you sign the promissory note, and the lawyers hand you the mortgage, and you sign the mortgage. In other words, the bank has the title to the house. It's the bank's house until you've paid it all off, and then they will give you the title at the end of the mortgage. I'm not living in my house, I'm living in the bank's house, but that's
Yeah.
okay because that's what banks are for,
Yes.
to give me the
You're
money.
leasing it from them, basically.
Okay, so the banker takes the promissory note and leaves the room. Takes the promissory note and the mortgage, and he leaves the room, and he comes back with checks. So he comes back with a check for the lawyers. He comes back with the check for the brokers, for the real estate people, for the title company that assures that the title is good and there aren't going to be any problems, right? And he puts in your mortgage account the amount of the principal, and it comes out of that account to the seller.
Okay.
Okay, where did the bank get the money to do that?
Well, it took the money that was given to it by people who deposit cash in the bank.
Oh, so the bank tells you that you can't have your money because they've lent it to someone else? Is that what happens? You get a letter from the bank, we lent your deposit to somebody?
No, no. So
It
I think
doesn't happen, does it?
what you're hinting at,
Okay,
I think, is called fractional
so,
reserve banking.
well, hang on a second.
Okay.
There ain't no such thing. It's the whole idea of fractional reserve banking is an illusion. It's a sort of a way of making what they do reasonable. But what
Yeah.
we're getting at is that when you sign the promissory note and the mortgage, and it's the promissory note that's the mortgage is backing up the promissory note. It's nowhere near as significant, except in your life, as the promissory. You are promising that you will do all the things necessary to have the money to make the monthly payment to the bank.
Yeah.
That promissory note is very valuable. it's more valuable than what they're lending you because it includes all that interest.
Oh,
And you know that banks sell them.
right.
Can you sell something that isn't yours?
The banks can.
No, it's theirs. You
Oh,
gave them a promise to pay. That
right.
promise to pay is an asset of the bank. The bank owns it exactly like it owns that $100 bill.
Okay.
No different. What did it put in your bank account that you paid the seller with? The same thing. Now look, this is the deep dive. This is that moment where your whole worldview changes. They put in your bank account what they owe you. They put their liability. You gave them an asset, your promise to pay, bank's asset, your liability, their liability, your asset. They put their liability in the bank account, and it's their liability and your asset.
Okay.
That's how accounting works always. There's always assets and liabilities, and they always work out, including, okay, could the bank have lent you money that they had saved and that was part of their retained earnings and capital of the bank?
Yes, but I don't think they've done that for what, 80, 90 years?
No, they've never done it. They have always lent you what they owe you.
Okay.
Now, I went through this carefully enough so that the weight of banks issue the money, right, should be clear. The
Okay.
bank created the money that they lend you, quote unquote, lend you, but as credit, as their liability, what they owe you. So
Okay.
you and the bank both came to the table at the closing with no money. You came to the table with no money, so you promised to pay. The bank came with no money, so they monetized your promise to pay. That is an
Ah,
amazingly, that is an amazingly special privilege. Banks get to monetize your word.
huh.
Banks get to create the money that you agreed to pay them.
Okay.
That's law, right? That's the Federal Reserve Act. That's private banking law. That's what all the regulation's about.
Okay.
Okay, so here comes the consequence. You can only get money for what will be profitable to a bank.
Okay.
All of the money in circulation in America and in the world is issued by banks as a debt to themselves, their liability, what they owe you.
Okay.
Can you imagine giving a private company the power to issue money only for things that will be profitable to them when we are completely dependent on getting money in order to live?
It would
Oh,
mean that they would control everything of real importance and be the lever keepers on
so,
what the
so do
public
we?
was able to invest in.
Okay, so now
Typically,
let's relieve the pressure. Hey, should we have a public bank?
I think
Shall we
so.
have shall we have a bank that isn't only lending money or only creating money for purposes that will be profitable to it?
Yeah. Yes. I believe it's a good idea. For the little bit I've studied about the North Dakota
Okay,
Bank, which is the
so
enabling legislation, I think you said here in California is based upon that. I looked at the bill, and it heavily references
right,
the North Dakota Bank.
yeah. And the point about the bill, it's interesting how the process, you said earlier in the pre-interview that you know it was amazing how everybody caved. The legislature passed it, the governor signed it. All of a sudden, it just happens. Why? Because they haven't
Yes.
created a public bank. They've cleared the hurdle so that nobody can argue that it's illegal for a county or a city or a university, any public entity in California to start a public bank. Now they actually have to do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so
Fair enough.
nobody
But
has actually chartered a public bank yet,
so there is no
but
public
there's
bank
no
in
obstacle.
California. Yeah.
No public bank in California yet. But in 2020, I mean, San Francisco and Los Angeles and Berkeley and I can't remember. I can't keep all this in my head. I mean, there are lots of cities that are working on the bill that would establish the public bank. Okay, so now what I want to do, once you understand that our entire culture, our entire society, our entire economy is totally all based on what you can get money for that will be profitable to a bank.
Right.
Okay, so now we can think, well, if we weren't interested in making a profit even for our public bank, right? And we were talking together about what would be a good thing to issue money for that we could be responsible for. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what the bank is doing, right? Monetizing our credit is, the way to create money. There is there's no argument there. You can't issue money except as a receipt for a genuine good or service. It can't be backed by gold and silver. There is nowhere near enough gold and silver.
Right.
And in fact, if you back it with gold or silver, the legal tender value of the money has to be much higher than its value as gold or silver. So it's still a matter of law. It's still something that has to be created as a social technology, like rights. What are rights? Rights. Governments are instituted to secure our inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if we were sitting together, I want to get at why public banking is so important, beyond it would cost us less interest.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to banking for a bit. Tell me what you're thinking, because it helps to know a little bit about where you're at and what you're thinking and how this is affecting you.
Well, from the research that I have done, which was largely based upon Ellen Brown's reading and the North Dakota Public Bank, it appears that the public bank is, like you said, its goal is to serve the public. It's not to necessarily make a profit for people who own the bank. People forget that there are rich people, 1%ers, who own each bank, and it's their concern to make money off that bank. It's basically a business, whereas the public bank is more like a public infrastructure. It provides for things. Its goal is not to just make as much profit as possible. And so instead of earning interest on the money that's deposited in the public bank, that interest can be turned back to the government for infrastructure projects or lowering initial taxes, as I understand, which is something a private bank would never do.
Right, but that's just sort of the superficial argument. The superficial argument is it'll cost us less and we'll have more. The interest won't be going to Wall Street. It'll be coming back to us.
Yes.
So if you look at what the Bank of North Dakota does, it returns about 17%. Its profitability is about 17%. It turns it back to the Treasury of North Dakota, and it goes into the general fund. That's the superficial argument. That's
right.
Okay, so we would have less interest. But now let's imagine that we have a public bank. Now, I need to go back and say a little bit more about the consequences of private banking creating all our money. And, and the reason is that it creates it creates an awareness when we do this, when we look at the consequences. It creates an awareness of the extent to which the banking system has created this society, right? It creates the awareness that it doesn't have to be the way it is if we had a public bank, right? That wasn't concerned about only issuing money for things that are profitable to it. So let's look at the consequence. If the money is issued by the bank as what it owes you when you give it a promissory note, and it puts what it owes you in your bank account, you are going to be paying principal and interest. They created only the principal. So part of the question then is, well, if all the money comes into circulation as a debt to the bank or as the bank's liability, then every time you make a principal payment, right, the asset of the bank goes down, right? You're paying off that promissory notes.
Right.
The asset of the bank goes down, and therefore also the amount of money goes down. The liability of the bank goes down.
Okay.
Every principal payment extinguishes, every principal payment to the bank extinguishes the money.
Okay.
So by the time you've paid the entire principal, right, that money is gone again. It's disappeared into the accounting system by which it was created.
Okay.
Okay. Where is the interest that you're going to pay going to come from if all the money was created as the principal of a loan?
Where does the interest come from if all of the money was created for the principal of the loan?
Yeah,
The interest is from you. You have to pay both the principal and the interest. So
that's right. But from the mechanics of the monetary system, where does it come from?
the Federal Reserve prints notes. They're issued by.
If all the money is being issued as a debt, right, as the principal of a loan, it has to come from new principal of loan. In
Okay.
order for you to pay the interest, somebody else has to go into debt in order for you to have the money to pay the interest.
Okay.
Not a problem. The interest circulates. There isn't, I'm not trying to say that there's a problem, right? But there is. Because what happens is that somebody is going to use that money to make another loan that doesn't extinguish, right? Who might use that money to make another loan, right? So the second biggest lender is the insurance companies. What are they going to do with all that principal? All those premiums that they have, you know, because when they make a payment, you make a little bit of a payment with your premium and they make great big payments, right? So they have to be able to cash out, right? They have to invest that money. They have to invest that in very safe things. So they lend it. And if you're a business, you're as likely to get a mortgage from an insurance company as from a bank.
Okay.
All shopping malls, they're all insurance company money. So you have a huge, this is what Ellen calls the shadow banking system. In other words, the people who are lending the already borrowed money again, who are then lending the already borrowed money again. So each time you have interest. Now, the mechanics of the situation are such that if everybody paid off their bank loans, there would be no money. If everybody paid off their loan, right, there wouldn't be any money, and you'd still owe all this interest. So that means that as a feature of the system, there has to be a debt that never gets paid down, no principal is ever paid, and it has to be big enough to be the permanent money supply. It never gets paid off. Can you
Okay.
imagine what that debt would be?
Really big.
Really big. What's really, really big debt? Over $21 trillion.
There you go.
What is it?
What what is the $21
What
trillion
is that?
dollars?
Yeah,
It's
what
the
is that
combined
debt?
debt of the United States of America.
There you go. It's the federal debt. When did
Right.
it last get paid down?
When did what?
When was the last time that the federal debt got paid down?
Clinton was president, I believe.
And no, that was just no deficit, no increase
Okay.
in the federal debt. That's what that was. Andrew Jackson. You got to go back to 1830,
Ah,
1840, right? So the federal debt is the permanent money supply.
okay.
You mean the fact that the people owe all this money and it has no, I mean, if we had public banks, we could go into that sort of extreme debt with no consequence? You mean it's the nature of
In
money,
theory.
right? It's the nature of money
Right.
that okay, so we're going to issue all the money as a loan, as a debt, as our liability. We'll use all of our income, all our tax income, all of our earnings for the state, and it'll be in the public bank. It's what capitalizes the public bank. We can follow all the same rules, but we can go into a similar amount of debt with no consequence.
Theoretically, yes, it seems that
Okay,
way.
so now you have an understanding of how everything could change if we were to sit together and talk about how we want things to be. Let's say that it takes a while. We get a public bank, right?
Okay.
And so the city of San Francisco says, what are we now able to do that we weren't able to do before? And the city council starts talking about it. And one of the things that comes up in conversation is, you know how you relieve poverty? You give people enough money so they're not poor.
Hmm.
What if you got a check every month at the beginning of the month, right? So that you were in a position to do what it is that you really wanted to do, what you love to do.
Like UBI?
Well, why do we need UBI?
I don't want to veer off course on
This is
another
not
topic.
veering, this is not veering off course. The reason that you're talking to me, instead of to somebody who's talking about, well, then we'd pay less interest and nothing would change, except the public would pay less interest. We'd have a little bit more money so that we could build the public park. You've watched the little video, right? Where they get a public bank so they get to build the park. Have you seen
I
that
understand the
on the,
concept.
it's on the public banking website.
Okay.
But you're talking to me so that you get a real appreciation for the power of the public bank. So
Okay.
if we're sitting together and we can issue money, we can go into infinite debt with no consequence. I mean, we can go from, you know, $6 or $8 trillion to $21 trillion in 10 years, or 22 or 23. We don't even know how much it is, right? Or go look at the debt clock and watch it. Look at how much it is per person. I mean, do you know about the debt clock?
Yes.
Okay, so you can go and click on your state, your town, I mean, your city, what have you, how much in taxes, how much debt per person, et cetera, et cetera. I have it on my phone so I can show it to people every once in a while. Anyway, So the question arises, how do we relieve poverty? If you give people enough money to live, they're not poor anymore. And they're not being forced to do something that they don't want to do. Okay, so let's go back to, this is why you're interviewing me, so that you get the picture of how powerful public banking could really be.
Okay.
This is really important. So let's go back to the Declaration of Independence for a moment. And I won't give you much history, I'll just give you a wee little bit, okay? And let's think about what it says. Governments are instituted among men to secure their inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if we want to secure our life, we would need to give everybody enough money to live at the level that the economy can support. Right? If we want to secure their life. If everybody has a right to life, right, then we need to make sure that they have enough money to live. That's what this whole thing about, free healthcare and Social Security and all this stuff is all about. It's where we keep going, right? That's why Andrew Yang's running on, guaranteed income, because it's just so simple. If we don't want poor people, we got to give them money. Okay, here's the problem. That makes no sense. Nobody would do anything. Oh, you mean the existing system has so distorted human nature that we forget that everybody's just like us? And the only thing that makes you happy is the liberty to do what you love to do? To pursue the transcendent purpose that motivates you? To pursue the life mission that you experience ongoing? Are you living out of your life's mission, out of your purpose, out of your life's purpose? Are you oriented all the time? You, Marcus, are you oriented towards doing what you believe in would be good for society?
Yes.
Are you like everybody else?
Uh, that's a very big question.
Okay, so you're
Am I
arrogant
motivated?
enough to believe that you're way better than most people. No.
No.
Okay, so if I am at liberty to pursue my mission in life, if I am at liberty to pursue my life's purpose, right, then I will pursue happiness. What is the only thing that genuinely makes you happy? Succeeding in your life's mission and doing it your way,
Sure.
with the opportunity to develop your capacity to do it increasingly well in cooperation with all the people who you feel are part of your community.
Okay.
You mean if we had public banks, we could free everybody up to do the meaningful thing that they feel called to do, with the capacity, with the possibility of ongoing quality improvement, right? Oh my God. We could totally change society. Why would we ever permit the externalization of costs? Why do we permit garbage and pollution? There's absolutely no need. Let's clean it all up. We're not. Okay, the question is it a good idea? Right? Are there people who really want to do it, for whom it's mission? Right?
Yeah.
Are they capable of doing it? Yeah, they've
Uh,
got the training, they've got the, okay. Is it a good use of the built and natural resources? Okay, so it's a
the
good
project.
idea. We think it's a good idea. We like it. It would benefit everybody. It's a good idea. There are people who really want to do it and they're capable of doing it, and it's a good use of the resources.
Okay.
When you have a public bank, the question is no longer where are you going to get the money? It doesn't
It's
have to
just
be
funded.
profitable. We're going to issue the money for it. Why? Because it's a good idea. There are people who want to do it, and they're capable of doing it, and it's a good use of the resources.
Okay.
Boom.
As opposed to a private bank where it's
Wanting to
only
make a
if it's
profit.
profitable for the bank.
Yeah. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be profitable.
Okay.
Now, will the money circulate? Okay, now here comes the crux of the thing. We're coming up on 8 minutes to the hour, so that if we want to finish it in an hour, we're going to do
Yeah.
the last piece.
Yeah.
Here's something that everybody knows. And the reason that I take my hard-earned money and exchange it for something that I want is because I will be better off, in my estimation, in my sense of value. I will be better off than if I hold on to the money. I'm going to buy that car because that car will make me better off than if I just hold on to my old car and keep the money and not spend it or borrow it or what have you. Every transaction that is entered into by two parties freely, with no hidden, transparent, no fraud, right, makes both parties to the exchange better off. You got that?
Yeah.
I go into the store and I know that if I buy whatever it is at the advertised price, the store's going to be better off. In fact, that's why they're there, right? And I'm going to be better off. They'd rather have the money. I'd rather have the toaster or the car or whatever, or the food or the what have you. And I'm willing to pay a little more for organic because I think it's better for me and the environment.
Okay.
So human nature is such that every transaction freely entered into, facilitated by money, makes both parties to the transaction better off.
Sure.
This is the capital formation process. In the aggregate, with all the transactions that are happening, we should all be increasingly better off. Where is the surplus going to? Where is the better off going to? How does the system work? Did you buy the bank a house first? Where is the better off
Yes.
going
The
to?
current banking system is yes.
It's going to interest.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's imagine for a moment that the bank charges enough interest to cover its costs and that's it.
Okay.
And it only makes equity investments.
Okay.
It only ever issues money as an equity investment or to fund something that isn't ever, that's not going to be profitable, that will be subsidized out of the profits from the equity investments. Now, everything that happens is related to the fortunes of the business. It was a good idea. They were competent. Okay, it's going to keep going, making more money, more value, creating more value. We're going to have to issue more money to represent that value. We were wrong. They weren't capable. That whole millions of dollars that we plowed into that project, it didn't work. Okay, we have to take money out of circulation. Right? In other words, we have to keep the money value constant.
Right.
Why does the banking system inflate the money? Because you're paying with current value money up front in interest, so it's fine if you pay off the loan with inflated money at the end.
Okay.
From a banking point of view, that makes okay, so let's target 2 or 3% inflation. That'll keep us healthy, us bankers. Okay, so last piece of this. The banking system, by being private and only issuing money for things that it thinks will be profitable to it, that it's sure will be profitable to the bank, right, is creating the situation that we're in because the interest is due and payable regardless of what happens in your life or in what it is that you put the money up for.
Yeah.
You have to pay the interest regardless. So is everybody pursuing their transcendent purpose? Or is everybody making sure they have enough money to make the mortgage payment?
That's a very deep philosophical
That's what
existential
I
question.
said. Yes. But it's what public banking makes possible. Public banking, we can say to each other, no, we should all be doing that which we feel called to do. And we don't have to look at it from a religious point of view, because everybody has that experience of, what should I dedicate my life to? What should I do with my life? Well, okay, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a good job, and I can support my family. No. Whatever I do, we're getting a check at the beginning of the month. A dividend, not a debt base, it's just a dividend off the overall productivity of the economy. If you want to learn about that as a system, you go to social credit on the internet, the Michael Journal, whatever, Wikipedia. There was a whole movement at the time of the Federal Reserve, with the establishment of the Federal Reserve, for the dividend that results from everybody's increasingly better off. Well, we need to issue the money and distribute it to everybody so that they have the money in order to buy all the goods and services that the economy is capable of producing.
Right.
So there's
Circular
a
flow.
social dividend. We need to be able to issue the money. Okay, so you get the check at the beginning of the month. You are now in a position to do, you are now at liberty to do what makes you happy. And the thing that makes you happy is succeeding in your mission in life. And you can test this with your group. Whenever you're sitting in a circle, say, hey, let's take 5 or 10 minutes and let's talk about what we're most afraid of. So after they get past the, I'll lose my job and I won't be able to make the mortgage payments, it turns out that the thing that everybody is most afraid of, is not succeeding in accomplishing their life's work, their mission in life. So let us put everyone in a position to cooperate with each other, to create what it is that they want to dedicate their blood, sweat, and tears to. That is what public banking makes possible. Why? Because the question is it a good idea? Are there people who want to do it? Are they capable of doing it? Is it a good use of the resources? Because if it is, we're going to issue the money for it. In fact, the reason we can issue the money is that that's a promise to make it valuable, to do the thing that we all agreed would be valuable, would benefit everyone, would be wonderful. And now you are no longer in a position to think we're going to save some interest. No, the people will be deciding. The city council will be deciding what would be good for everyone. And if the federal debt can go from $12 trillion before the whatchamacallit, the bankers blew up the housing market and crashed it, right? And made a huge profit and consolidated all the banks. We went from 40% to 20% independent banks, approximately, right? To over $22 trillion, and there hasn't been inflation, and interest rates are really, why are interest rates so low? Because at their traditional rate, we would never be able to pay the interest on the federal debt. It would take up more than all of the tax revenue. So they better keep interest rates down, low, really low. Oh, and it has another consequence. There's no safe place to invest your money. Now everybody has to invest their money. Now, Did you hear that, or is the internet unstable?
No, that's an alarm. I got to go in about 5 minutes, but I did
No,
have
that's
about two
fine.
minutes worth of comments I'd like to make before
Go
we end
right
the.
ahead.
Okay, so this has been a discussion on public banking. What we're referring to is known as Assembly Bill 857. It was passed here in California in October 2019, but originally it was based upon an attempt in 2014 by Ellen Brown and others to pass. The interesting thing was that in 2014, both houses or the complete Sacramento legislature approved of this, but Governor Brown shut it down. Governor Newsom, with little fanfare and little acknowledgement, has basically made this law. It's enabling legislation, and as John Root has said, it doesn't actually make any of the banks here, but it allows us to legally make them happen. This has been a debate for 5 years, and the fact that it's quickly and with little notice happened is significant. The big difference about a public bank versus a private bank is that governments will now, instead of paying a private bank interest money, like Wells Fargo, will deposit your tax dollars or any revenues that the city, county, state, or other government agencies will go into the private bank. So
The
then that
public
bank,
bank
I'm sorry?
will go into the public bank,
We'll go into the public bank. Yes, we'll
where
go into
the
the public
where
bank.
the interest benefits the public.
Yes, where the interest benefits the public. So you have your governments, and right now you as a taxpayer pay taxes to the government. And then the government pays some of your taxes to a bank to house your taxes. Instead of doing that, the government would put this money into the public bank and it wouldn't have to raise interest rates on itself, which means that the government is actually saving money by depositing its tax revenue in the public bank. That money can be used to give loans back to cities, et cetera, for infrastructure projects at low or no interest. So you have two savings. One is that the California government would be able to fund infrastructure projects without paying for interest or very low interest. Additionally, the California government would no longer be paying millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to private banks to service or hold the tax money in return. So you have tax savings and you have low interest loans. Collectively, that allows California to invest in a lot of things. Just a couple quick numbers. When we look at the North Dakota Bank, and it was the public bank, and we look at 2010 numbers, they had $4 billion in assets and $327 million in capital cash available for loaning. Now, I did a quick survey of the North Dakota economy in 2016 and compared it to California. Basically, California is 49 times larger than North Dakota. So if we look at 2016 numbers, and this is if you had a California public bank or a series of public banks and their combined assets and liquid cash. So looking at the North Dakota numbers, California's public bank or series of banks comprising a California public banking system would equal $16 billion in liquid cash available for loans and $196 billion in assets. What's key for Californians is to recognize that the highly controversial gas tax here in California, which half the population didn't like, was only going to raise $52 billion over a 10-year period. The public bank alone has $16 billion per annum with no increase in tax revenue and actually a savings. Whereas we in California had to raise gas taxes on ourselves to make $52 billion. Frankly put, we wouldn't need the gas tax and we'd have money left over and we could fix all our roads and we'd have tax savings if we had a public bank. Additionally, one last thing I got to point out though is that public banks are recession proof. While every bank in America was going down during the global recession of 2008, the North Dakota Public Bank consistently showed earnings every year throughout the recession when all of the private banks didn't. If we have a public bank and we have the surplus budget that Governor Brown started and being continued under the current governor, we will have two effective tools for the next recession, which everyone says is coming. Given that California was the worst hit state in all of America in the 2008 recession, basically we were hit the worst, it's in our interest as Californians to not go into a super horrible dip in the next recession. A public bank and our surplus would allow us to do that. I'm done.
Right. And what I was trying to do in this interview was expand our expand our understanding of what public banking
Oh
can
yeah,
do, so
yeah.
that
The
we
deep
would
philosophy.
get to that place where we understand that the primary tool that the sovereign uses to create the conditions in which we all live is money creation. And if private banks are creating it, then society reflects their need for profit. And if public banks are doing it, then we get what we decide together would be good. In
So
other
it would
words,
make us better people.
if the people are going to be sovereign, then the question is, what do the people want? What would benefit everyone? Well, if the money is being issued by the people in order to accomplish what the people have committed to doing, no different from borrowing the money from the bank, right? You're committed to doing what it is that you said you wanted to do, right? But it doesn't have
Right,
to be profitable,
right,
right?
right,
It has to be good.
right,
And everything changes. If the
right,
people are issuing the money, then society reflects our values, not profit.
right.
And
So
we could prioritize environmental healing. We could prioritize no poverty.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. They've been doing an experiment with UBI in Stockton
Yeah.
recently to see if it even work out. And I think the money's coming from a private company, but it could come from a public bank. In theory, there's nothing stopping that, as I understand.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the philosophy. I think
Good.
the thing is that we are so used to it's about making profit and everybody looks out for the bottom line and increasing profit that to hear that there would be a financial system that fundamentally doesn't use that as the decision process for making decisions, and that it looks at, I don't know if it's profitable. Is it a good thing to do for the public? It's just Americans don't entertain that thought process when dealing with cash. And so I think it's a very new and and exotic to think about finances that way. And I think you did a great job at pushing a human mind through what they've known and grown up with into a basically theoretical possibilities that we've never actually seen before. And
Yeah.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant, sir. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it much. And thank you
Yeah.
to Jim,
Thank
Jim
you, Jim.
Hogue. Thank you, Jim.
Second Vermont Republic connection. From another interview I did with Jim Hogue, Second Vermont Republic, he referred me to John Root Jr., who's an expert on public banking, and was able to walk you through not just the mechanics, but what does this mean, how society in California could change at the individual level simply by having to think, because now there's the possibility of a bank that isn't just trying to make a profit over people's bodies, and how radically that could change our entire society here. You've
Okay.
heard it, right? I mean, that's what you're getting at, right? Is
Absolutely.
recognize this isn't just dollars and cents. Like, this could change the way a society thinks.
Absolutely. Okay.
Um, yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
I
Please send
will.
me a recording on Google Drive or wherever, and I will post this up today.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
sir.
Marcus. You and I both have to get to our next engagement. We'll see
Thank
ya.
you, John.
Thank
Okay.
you.